ladies. Now listen, a man's mind is like a storm when you go silent. When the words stop coming, the questions start. He's not just thinking about what you said or didn't say. He's running the whole movie in his head day by day. When you go silent, it's not just an absence of words. It's like opening a doorway to a whole world of thoughts in a man's mind. Silence doesn't mean a man suddenly stops thinking. Quite the opposite. What happens is that the quiet space you leave becomes a canvas where his mind starts painting all kinds of pictures, some bright and hopeful, others dark and confusing. A man's brain naturally wants to make sense of what's happening around him. When communication stops, when the back and forth dialogue that usually ties people together is interrupted, his mind begins filling in the blanks. Think of it like watching a movie with missing scenes. He tries to connect the dots between what he knows and what he doesn't. But since there's no new information coming from you, he starts guessing. And often those guesses are driven by emotion more than logic. The trouble with silence is that it's a breeding ground for questions. Those questions start small at first. Did I say something wrong? Is she upset with me? Am I still important to her? But soon they multiply. Is she pulling away? Did I mess up so bad that she no longer wants to talk? Is there someone else? The mind begins racing through all the possible reasons for the silence. And because humans are wired to protect themselves from pain and uncertainty, sometimes these thoughts turn into fears. What if the silence means the end of the relationship? What if it's a sign that things are about to fall apart? What if she's losing interest? In the absence of answers, the imagination runs wild. A man might replay every conversation, every action, every small moment to try and find a clue. Maybe he wonders if he didn't listen enough, if he wasn't supportive, or if he missed a chance to show he cared. The silence forces him to confront insecurities he might normally keep tucked away. It's like he's stuck in his own head, wrestling with questions that don't have clear answers. And this process is exhausting because the more he tries to solve the puzzle of your silence, the less sure he feels. It's important to understand that this isn't about a man wanting control or demanding answers just for the sake of it. It's deeper than that. Men, like women, crave connection and understanding. When communication breaks down, the silence disrupts that connection. It creates distance, not just physically, but emotionally. He feels it as a kind of emptiness where the warmth of conversation and shared feelings used to be. And that emptiness feels like a void that needs to be filled, so his mind fills it with scenarios that often lean toward the negative because the unknown feels threatening. Now, this process is natural, but it can lead to problems if it continues too long. The more he sits with silence, the more those thoughts can spiral. It can become a kind of mental loop where the same worries and fears repeat over and over. This isn't just about being upset or confused. It can actually start affecting how he feels about himself and the relationship. When a man feels he's being left in the dark, he might start doubting his worth or the strength of the bond you share. He might question if he's enough or if he's failed somehow. The silence, instead of being peaceful, becomes heavy and oppressive. This is why communication is so vital. When you share what's on your mind, even if it's difficult or uncomfortable, it stops the guessing game. It gives him real information to work with so he doesn't have to fill the silence with stories that might not be true. It shows him you care enough to be honest. And that keeps the connection alive. Silence, after all, is only golden when it's comfortable and mutual, like sitting together in quiet peace. But when silence is forced or comes from distance and withdrawal, it becomes a space of anxiety. Men may not always say this out loud, but inside the silence can be loud with questions and emotions. It's important to recognize that silence isn't just an empty pause. It's a signal that something needs attention. By understanding how a man's mind works during these quiet times, you can appreciate why speaking up, sharing feelings, or just explaining where you are emotionally can make a world of difference. It prevents his mind from drifting into confusion and worry, and instead keeps him grounded in the reality of your relationship. In that space of silence, he's looking for clues, even if he doesn't say it. Maybe it's a text, a word, a gesture, anything that says, I'm here, I'm still with you. Because without those clues, his thoughts can become a storm, and that storm can push him away instead of bringing him closer. So silence creates space, yes, but what fills that space matters a whole lot. When you go silent, his mind fills that space. Day by day, moment by moment, trying to understand, hoping for answers, sometimes fearing the worst. And that's why it's so important to break the silence before it breaks the connection. Silence is often misunderstood as simply the absence of noise or words, but in reality, silence can be one of the loudest forms of communication, especially in relationships. When someone goes silent, it doesn't mean nothing is being said. It means something powerful is happening underneath the surface, louder than any spoken word could ever be. Silence speaks volumes, and a man will hear it clear as day. When you stop talking, when you pull back emotionally and don't share what's going on inside, that quiet sends a signal. It's like a spotlight shining on the distance growing between two people. And even though no words are exchanged, the silence itself carries messages. Messages that can be confusing, painful, or alarming. A man senses this, and it often feels like the loudest kind of noise he's ever heard because silence forces him to listen to what's really going on inside both your heart and his own. The power of silence is that it creates a vacuum, a space that demands to be filled with meaning. Because we are wired to seek connection and clarity, when words stop coming, we don't just sit peacefully in the quiet. Instead, the silence starts to roar. It roars with questions, doubts, fears, and unspoken emotions. The louder the silence, the more a man's mind tries to interpret it. And often, those interpretations can be harsh or painful because when communication breaks down, the mind fills the silence with what it fears most. For a man, silence can feel like a storm inside. Even if he doesn't say it out loud, he can feel the tension mounting. He might feel like he's standing in a room where the air has suddenly gone thick and heavy. It's uncomfortable. It's unsettling. The silence can feel like rejection or like a wall going up between him and the person he cares about. And when silence is loud, it becomes hard to ignore. It demands attention, even if he's not sure what to do with it. One of the hardest things about silence is that it's ambiguous. Words can be clear or confusing, but silence leaves no clarity at all. When you speak, even if it's a tough conversation, you're giving a man something real to hold on to. But silence leaves him in a space of uncertainty. And uncertainty is noisy in its own way. It's loud with unknowns. It's loud with the possibility of loss, distance, and pain. When silence gets loud, it often drowns out hope and replaces it with worry. Men, like anyone else, want to feel understood and valued. Where silence replaces dialogue, he feels invisible in a way. The loud silence tells him that maybe what he says or does doesn't matter right now, that the connection is on pause. That kind of silence isn't peaceful or restful. It's loud with absence, the absence of shared thoughts, the absence of reassurance, and the absence of emotional closeness. And that absence hurts more than words can. Because silence is so loud, it can push a man's emotions to the edge. He might start feeling frustrated or angry, even if deep down he's just confused and hurt. The louder the silence, the more pressure builds inside. And if that pressure isn't released through conversation or action, it can cause him to pull away, to protect himself from pain. He may close off emotionally, or worse, start imagining outcomes that are more painful than reality. This is why silence can be so dangerous in relationships. It's not just quiet. It's a loud echo chamber of fears and doubts. At the same time, silence can be a test. It can be a moment where a man measures his own patience and commitment. He wonders how long he can hold on without answers, without connection. And in that loud silence, he may be searching for a sign, any sign, that the relationship still matters to you. He listens for that signal in your eyes, your actions, your energy. Silence pushes him to face his own feelings and decide if he's willing to stay through the uncertainty or if the noise of silence is too much to bear. The loudness of silence also reflects the emotional distance growing between two people. When conversations stop, feelings can start to fade. And it's in that silence that doubts can take root. Without communication, trust can weaken and assumptions can grow. The loud silence says something's wrong even if the problem isn't clear yet. It's a warning signal that calls for attention, for care, for repair. This is why it's so important to recognize how loud silence can be and not underestimate its impact. When you choose silence, whether intentionally or not, you're sending a message that can be just as strong as words. It can communicate hurt, anger, confusion, or even love, but only if it's clear and understood. Otherwise, silence can be deafening in its ambiguity and pain. For a man who cares deeply, silence feels like a wall closing in. It's a loud, invisible barrier that blocks the connection he values. And the longer that silence stays, the louder it screams for attention. But it's a reminder that communication isn't just about talking. It's about sharing the inner world, keeping the connection alive, and breaking down barriers before they become walls. When you understand that silence is loud, you see why it can't just be ignored or left unexplained. It needs to be acknowledged, addressed, and sometimes broken, even if the words are hard to say. Because the loudness of silence isn't just a gap between two people, it's a call for connection, for honesty, and for healing. When silence falls between two people, it's more than just an empty space. It becomes a moment for a man to reflect deeply on what he feels and what he truly wants. Men, just like women, have an emotional world inside them, even if they don't always show it openly. That silence gives him the chance to step back and test the strength of his emotions, to measure how much he cares, and to decide what kind of effort he's willing to put into the relationship. It's important to realize that when a man is faced with silence, it often triggers a sort of internal evaluation. He asks himself questions he might not normally say out loud. Am I being heard? Does she still want me? Is this relationship worth fighting for? These thoughts are not just fleeting, they stick around and grow stronger over time. The silence forces him to sit with his feelings without distractions or reassurances, and in that stillness, his emotions become clearer. He can't run from them, he has to face them. During this period of silence, a man reflects on the relationship's history, the good moments, the struggles, the promises made, and the challenges faced. He replays memories in his mind and weighs them against the current quietness. That reflection helps him understand how much the relationship means to him and whether it's something he wants to protect. It's a time of reckoning where emotions are put on trial. This testing of emotions is essential because men often express love and commitment differently from women. While words and gestures matter, A man's feelings are frequently demonstrated through actions and perseverance, especially during tough times. Silence challenges him to prove to himself that his feelings are real and strong enough to withstand uncertainty. It's a personal test of resilience, how much he's willing to endure without clear answers or warmth from the other side. What's more, the silence forces him to explore his patience. Patience is not just waiting, it's how he manages his hope and frustration as days go by without communication. Will he remain calm and hold on to the belief that things can be worked out? Or will his hope start to fade and frustration rise? This balance between hope and frustration is delicate and critical. The way a man handles this tension often determines whether he steps back or steps up. At the same time, silence prompts him to evaluate his self-worth. When he doesn't hear from you, he may begin to question if he's valued, if he matters enough to break the quiet. This can be tough because men are socialized to be strong and independent, so admitting vulnerability in silence is a private struggle. But inside, he may be feeling hurt or rejected, and he uses this time to gauge if he should keep fighting for your attention and affection. This reflection is a test of not only the relationship, but also how he sees himself within it. In addition to evaluating the relationship and himself, a man also contemplates the future during silence. He wonders where the relationship is headed and if it's worth the effort to stay engaged. Silence can make the future seem uncertain and fragile. He weighs the possibility of moving forward together against the risk of losing something valuable. This internal debate can be exhausting but necessary. It helps him prepare emotionally for whatever decision he might need to make next. This reflection isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it stirs up feelings of confusion, sadness, and even fear. A man might feel lost in the silence, unsure how to bridge the gap that's grown between you. The testing of emotions can be a lonely experience because it's largely internal. He might not express what he's going through, but it's happening nonetheless. And it's during this quiet time that the true depth of his feelings is revealed. What's crucial is understanding that this process isn't about weakness. It's about emotional processing. Men often face societal pressure to be strong and hide their emotions, but silence gives them the space to quietly confront what they're feeling without judgment. It's a private, sometimes painful journey, but it's also a necessary one for emotional clarity and growth. While this internal testing of emotions can bring clarity, it can also create tension. The longer the silence lasts, the more intense the reflection becomes. The men may start to feel pressure to act, to speak up, or to make a decision. He might reach a breaking point where the uncertainty is too much and he either decides to fight harder or to step away. The emotions tested during silence often dictate what path he takes next. If the silence is met with understanding and communication later, it can strengthen the relationship because it shows resilience and a willingness to work through tough times. But if the silence continues without resolution, the emotional testing can lead to detachment. The feelings that were once strong can begin to fade under the weight of unanswered questions and unmet needs. Recognizing that a man reflects and tests his emotions during silence helps explain why it's so important to address the quiet honestly and openly. When you share your feelings and fears, you ease the burden of this emotional testing. You give him a partner to face the silence with, instead of forcing him to do it alone. This shared vulnerability creates trust and deepens the connection. Ultimately, silence is not just a pause. It's an emotional checkpoint for a man. It's where he confronts his love, commitment, patience, and hope. And while it can feel like a difficult test, it's also an opportunity for growth. For both him and the relationship, if met with honesty, empathy, and communication. Communication is the lifeline that keeps any relationship strong and healthy. When silence takes over, misunderstandings start creeping in like shadows in a room without light. Without clear communication, a man's mind is left to fill in the gaps, and those gaps are often filled with assumptions that may not be true. This is why speaking openly and honestly is crucial. It prevents the mind from twisting situations into confusing or hurtful stories. When two people stop talking, it's easy for small issues to grow into big problems in their minds. What might have been a simple misunderstanding can start to feel like a major conflict. A man not hearing what's really going on might assume the worst. He might think you're upset with him, that he did something wrong, or even that you no longer care. Without communication, these assumptions go unchecked, and they build walls instead of bridges between hearts. Clear communication acts like a map that guides both people through difficult times. When a man knows where you stand, whether you're stressed, hurt, or just need space, it helps him understand your feelings and intentions. This understanding prevents his mind from wandering into the territory of confusion and doubt. Instead of guessing, he gets clarity, and that clarity brings comfort. It tells him he's not alone in the silence. He's heard and seen. One of the most powerful ways communication prevents misunderstandings is by making room for honesty. When you share what's really on your mind, you allow a man to see your true feelings. That honesty might include admitting fears, frustrations, or needs that are uncomfortable to express. But it also opens the door for empathy and connection. When a man hears your truth, even if it's hard, he feels respected and trusted. That respect strengthens the bond and reduces the chances of misinterpretation. Misunderstandings often come from fear of confrontation or the desire to avoid hurting someone's feelings. Sometimes people stay silent because they don't want to create drama or cause conflict. But ironically, that silence often causes more pain than the conversation ever would. When you communicate openly, you actually prevent drama by dealing with issues before they escalate. It's like fixing a leak before it floods the whole house. Another way communication prevents misunderstandings is by keeping expectations clear. When a man knows what you expect from him and what he can expect from you, it helps set a shared path. Without that clarity, assumptions take over. He might expect you to understand him without words, or you might expect him to guess your feelings. These unspoken expectations lead to disappointment because no one is truly on the same page. Talking openly sets those expectations where they belong, in the light, where both of you can see and understand them. Communication also creates a safe space for vulnerability. When a man feels safe to express his fears or frustrations without judgment, it breaks down walls. He doesn't have to hide behind silence or pretend everything is okay when it's not. This safety encourages honesty on both sides, which in turn prevents the misunderstandings that come from hiding or pretending. Silence often hides pain. Communication reveals it and allows healing. In relationships, it's not just about avoiding misunderstandings. It's about building understanding. When you talk, you learn more about each other's thoughts, feelings, and perspectives. This deepens the emotional connection and creates empathy. A man feels connected not just because he loves you, but because he truly understands you. And understanding comes only through communication. Sometimes the hardest part is starting the conversation after a period of silence. The fear of what might come up or the worry about hurting the other person can hold people back. But that first step, breaking the silence, is the most important. It shows a willingness to engage and a desire to keep the relationship healthy. Even if the conversation is difficult, it's better than letting silence create misunderstandings that grow bigger over time. The benefits of communication go beyond just preventing problems. It also builds trust. When a man sees that you are open and willing to share, he feels safe to do the same. Trust grows when there is consistent, honest dialogue. This trust becomes the foundation that helps both of you navigate future challenges without fear that silence will take over again. Finally, communication isn't just about talking, it's about listening too. A man needs to feel heard just as much as he needs to hear you. When you listen actively without interrupting or judging, you validate his feelings. This validation reduces misunderstandings because it shows that both sides are committed to understanding each other, not just being heard. In short, communication prevents misunderstandings by filling the silence with clarity, honesty, respect, and empathy. It stops assumptions from growing into barriers and creates a shared space where both people can feel safe and connected. When communication is present, the mind isn't left to wander into doubt and fear. Instead, it finds assurance and peace.